Okay, so welcome to another installment of Stepping Up Kosher. And before we get started, so first of all, everybody who's here, please help yourselves to a bagel. And don't take it offensive if you're making yourself a sandwich while I'm talking. There's plates, there's everything here. Please help yourself and make yourself a sandwich. And I wanted to take a moment to make an announcement that today's class is in the honor, it's being sponsored by Mrs. Vicky Belmont, and it's sponsored in honor of her grandson, who's not feeling well. His name is?
Simcha Yeshua ben Bat Raquel Tzipora.
Simcha Yoshua ben Rachel Tzipora, that he should have a speedy recovery, Refuah Shalem Okrova, a speedy recovery. He's not feeling well, and God willing, you'll report good news next week afterwards, and we'll hear that he's back to full health.
There's chicken pox.
Okay? All right. So, today is the last class in the introductory segment. I know that's hard to understand, right? Because we've been doing kosher for so long already here that it's like, hey, we haven't learned anything yet. All we've done is the basics so far. So, as I announced at the beginning of this class, we started off by going through the fundamentals of kosher, right? And to recap what we've done so far, I'm not going to go through all, but just to go through the list. We've already done the prohibition against flesh of a living animal, right? The rules for kosher animals and non-kosher animals. How a Jew eats eggs, particularly checking for blood. Cooking, that cooking needs to be done by a Jew and not by a non-Jew. The firstborn animal is not allowed to be eaten by a Jew, and exactly how that works. The gid hanasha, right? That's the back thigh of the animal from the story with Jacob. What are the signs of a kosher fish and non-kosher fish? How we kosherize vessels. I know a lot of you came right before Passover when we were doing the koshering of vessels, even if you didn't have to check it out. It's a fascinating process. Toiveling, or immersing vessels in a mikveh before we use them. So brand new vessels have to be immersed before we can use them. What are kosher and non-kosher locusts? New wheat. Right? We discussed that there's an annual cycle. There was an offering that was brought every year. Sure, I can get you some peppers. Let's get you a plate. So what are kosher locusts and what are not kosher? Oh, sorry, we were talking about chadash, which is brand new wheat. So every year there was a new cycle, there was an offering that was brought that would allow the new wheat, the new grains to be eaten for the new year. Because the first always had to go to God. We spoke about a sick person and how most of the laws of kosher, if not all the laws of kosher, are suspended when it comes to a Jew who is sick in a way that actually causes, that can bring about danger to his life, right? So he's fatally ill, and this can save his life. And then we spoke about what about preventive medicine, etc. We spoke about chametz, right? It was right before Passover. It was very, very appropriate at the time, very time appropriate. We spoke about not eating leavened bread on Passover. We spoke about tevel, which is food which has not had the gifts taken from it, right? Tithing and the first portion for the Kohen and for the Levite, etc. All those things and how that works today when we live outside the land of Israel. We spoke about an animal that is treif. Treif means that it's been ripped apart. In other words, there's some injury that it has that makes that the animal will not live through the year. So it's been slaughtered properly, but then it's discovered, either before or afterwards, that the animal was injured, and how that's not kosher. That's also the source of the word treif, right? The colloquial word treif that we use for anything that's not kosher. We spoke about wine of a non-Jew. We spoke about the liver and how complicated it is for a Jew to eat liver. We spoke about covering blood, which is not technically a kosher law, but it's part of preparing meat properly, that we have to cover the blood of an animal. We spoke about salting the meat after it's been shefted, after it's been slaughtered. We spoke about salting the meat to make sure that there's no blood in it. And we spoke about the different gifts that are given to the Kohen. There are 21 in total, but the different gifts that are given to the Kohen. We spoke about a dead animal. I think this is one of the last things we did. We spoke about a dead animal that has not been slaughtered properly, that a Jew is not allowed to eat it. And we spoke about... trying to remember which ones we did and which ones we didn't do. We spoke about the process called nikur, which is the delicate process after an animal is slaughtered of taking apart the different pieces of the animal to make sure that what's left is only kosher. So you take off the fats. You take, yes?
Can I have some water?
Yes, you may. Pass me a cup, please, Joseph. We spoke about the different parts of the animal that have to be taken off, and Avram is going to pour for you. Okay? I'm going to say thank you, Tim. We spoke about the different fats that you're not allowed to eat, and how by nikur, through the process of nikur, which is dissecting the animal, we take away any fats or any of the gidanasha or any different parts of the animal that we're not allowed to eat. You take them off through the process of nikur. We did the next few as well. We did Neta Riv. Okay, so here's where we skipped around a little bit. We already did the signs for a kosher chicken or kosher fowl, kosher birds. We did that already, and I believe that and we did the laws of slaughtering, right? We did that already, right? The laws of slaughtering. Okay, so we have about 6 left that we're going to do today. That will complete our list of the basics of kosher. The basics of kosher, and then starting next week we'll start diving into the details of each of those laws. Okay? How's that for a recap? See, they don't need to come the previous few weeks. Okay, so today we are going to begin with a law called Neta Rivai. What is Neta Rivai? Careful, Bina. Neta Rivai literally translated means the saplings of the 4th year. Okay, Nemar B'Torah. There is a verse in the Torah that says as follows. Welcome, Larry. Thank you for joining us this morning. He's on the live here. So, Ubashana Haravit. It says that in the 4th year, after we learned already about we did not learn about it yet. So actually, let's do them out of order. Let's get to Neta Revai in a moment. There is a mitzvah called Orla. Okay, Orla. Never Torah. It says in the Torah, that when you come to the land, unetatem called eitz ma'achal, and you will plant any tree. The araltem arlato et pirio shalosh shanim yilachem arelim lo yachel. You have to keep the fruit of these trees for 3 years. They have to be holy for you, and you're not allowed to eat them. Okay? This means to say that the Torah has prohibited. You want to see my lap? The Torah has prohibited any fruits that grow from a tree in the land of Israel for the first 3 years of its growth, whether it's a Jew's tree or a non-Jew's tree, which means it does not need to be owned by a Jew in order for this prohibition to take effect, even for a non-Jew. Sure, I'm happy to pass the tuna. Joe, can you please pass the tuna?
The tuna.
Thank you. Here you go, Minna. So whether it's owned by a Jew or whether it's owned by a non-Jew, for the first 3 years, we are not allowed to eat from the fruits of that tree. This prohibition is not just on the eating of the fruit, but it's also on having enjoyment from the fruit, right? So you're not allowed, let's say a Jew owns them, he's not allowed to take them and say, oh, I'll sell them to a non-Jew, or I'll give them to my dog to eat, or I'll use them for firewood. You're not allowed to enjoy this tree for the first 3 years. Now, there is a halacha l'Moshe Sinai, which means an oral tradition that's been passed down since Sinai, that also the fruits of trees outside of the land of Israel, right? So in the verse in the Torah, it seems to be only implying the trees in Israel. But according to our tradition, we have that even outside of the land of Israel, whether it's owned by a Jew or whether it's owned by a non-Jew, the fruits are not allowed to be eaten. Why? Why? Because they're holy for God. We're going to talk about that in a moment. But there is one leniency when it comes to the fruits outside the land of Israel. And that is, if it's not certain that the fruit, let's say, for example, most of you are thinking, I've never taken a fruit off a tree and not known where it's from, right? So for example, I take a fruit out of my backyard, I know already it's past the first 3 years, I'm good to go. Or I go to a non-Jewish friend, I can simply inquire. But what about when I go to Trader Joe's? What about when I go to Ralph's? And then we have what's called a suffix, it's a doubt. I take a fruit, an apple off the thing. I mean, there's a good chance it's not from the first 3 years, so gesund. But it might be from the first 3 years, right? So outside of the land of Israel, there's a leniency that if you don't know, then you're allowed to eat it. Okay. But if you don't know, but in Israel, if you don't know, then you're not allowed to eat it. It's a little more strict. You have to be sure, which is why in the land of Israel, when you buy fruits and vegetables, they actually usually come with a kosher symbol. You buy your fruits and vegetables from a kosher market, in other words, from a religious market. Welcome, Miriam. Good morning. And then they will make sure as well that it's not part of the first 3 years. Okay, so this leads us to the second law of kosher. The second concept in kosher, which we're going to talk about today, which is neta revoy, and we started talking about that. What happens at the end of that? What? Oh, you're just singing? Okay. At the end of that verse, it says that on the 4th year, what happens on the fourth year? 4th year, you're allowed to eat the fruit, but they have to be kodesh, holy to God. Meaning, after you wait those 3 years, we are obligated to treat the fruits of the 4th year with a special holiness, and that holiness reflects in that we only eat them in the city of Jerusalem and only while we are pure, which means a person cannot have just been at a funeral or been in contact with a dead body, etc., etc. Right? Okay. Now, there is a possibility, right? Because many of you are thinking, hold on a second. So I live in Israel. I live, let's say, Eilat is not technically part of the holiness of the land of Israel. So let's say I live in, I don't know, somewhere far away from Jerusalem, up in the north, right? And Miron, or in Tzfat, that's in the Galilee, right? I live there. And now I'm going to go from there, I'm going to try to get all the way down to Jerusalem with my fruits. This is the year, 500 CE. And I got to go, with my fruits and make sure that they don't spoil. There's no cars, no freeways, etc. Right? So hold on. So there is a possibility to what's called redeem the fruit. What does this mean? This means that you take the fruit that grew in the 4th year, and you switch them for money. And you take that money and you bring it to Jerusalem, and with that money you go into Jerusalem and you buy local fruits. In this way you transfer the holiness from the fruits to the money, from the money to the fruits, and you're good to go. Now, the thing is, today, we are all in the category of impure. Why? Because in order for us to fully become pure, we would need the red heifer, especially from impurity meaning we can go to the mikveh, right? But we can't get the sprinkling of the water from the red heifer. So for today, most of us, probably all of us, are in the category of impure. So what do? So in Jerusalem, what you do the 4th year is you take those fruits, you switch them for money which is worth a particular minimal amount, and then that money, you take it and you destroy it on Pesach. Interesting. You take that money, you burn it. Interesting. I've never done this. That's why I'm not familiar with it. And you do it. It seems like they do it specifically the 4th year from Shemitah. In other words, on Pesach of the year of Shemitah. Interesting. I'm not familiar with exactly how this is done, but there's some sort of process through which they move the holiness from the fruits to money, and then they get rid of that money. Probably today what they do is they give it to tzedakah, if I had to guess. Okay, so this is the 2 mitzvahs, the set that goes together, Arla and the 4th year, which is called Neta Revaya, the 4th year of the set. Okay. Thank you, Avram, for being such a good host today, making sure everybody has a seat. I apologize. If you guys would have told me you're all coming, then I would have known to put it on our table. All right. Very popular. I think it's the Torah that's popular. Okay.
So what if you don't live in Jerusalem?
If you don't live in Jerusalem, you're all good. You can buy fruits and vegetables from Trader Joe's without any issue.
No, but as far as the 4th year.
Same thing.
Oh, yeah.
They go together.
And during those three first years, we don't consume, of course, but just leave it in the tree.
Yeah.
And let
The birds,
squirrel,
right? Exactly.
birds,
Squirrels.
okay,
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay.
So
Even on the floor, I don't
Temima
touch
is bringing up a very interesting, the most relevant part of everything we've learned now, which is in California, a lot of people have,
Yes.
unlike in New York where I grew up, a lot of people have fruit trees in their backyard. So what we need to know is that the first 3 years that the tree gives fruit, you're not allowed to eat it. That's it. Now, I think probably no one around this table has a tree that's so young that it's still in its first 3 years. You do?
Yes.
Oh wow, look at
We
that.
just transplanted a lot.
You just
a month
what?
ago. We just planted a lot a month ago.
You just planted oh wow?
A lot have
You guys as well?
Yeah, my
Sheesh.
parents,
But
my
we
parents
planted-
planted some figs from one of our
Yeah.
fig trees.
And it's just started growing?
Yeah.
Okay, so for the first 3 years,
Figs,
you shouldn't
yeah,
eat from the fruits.
persimmons.
Not only that, I know some of you here, like, for example, your parents are not Jewish, right? So this applies to non-Jews as well. So a Jew is not allowed to eat even from a non-Jew's fruits. Isn't that interesting? So, okay. All right, look at that. I did not realize it was practical. I thought we're going through a law, it's one of the laws of kosher, but probably nobody here has to keep it. Okay? It goes to show you should never assume.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Can you buy a tree that
Yes.
is at least 3 years
Yes,
old?
that's fine.
And
That's
then
fine.
if you planted
Correct.
3-year-old or 4-year-old trees,
You know
don't have to
what?
worry.
We're starting to get into many of the nuanced details of these laws. Let's wait till we get to the nuanced details, okay?
Because that's what I
But
was
we
thinking
introduced
when
the
I
main
need
ones.
to buy a tree, that I would buy one that's
Okay.
5 years old.
All right. Exciting. I didn't realize it was such an exciting. You guys should have come in the beginning. We could have used your trees. Okay. All right. Moving on to the next law. So when we get, by the way, to the details of the laws of Arla, we're going to make sure to talk about all the different details like everybody knows. Maybe we'll even skip to it because it seems like it's very relevant to people. Okay, but for now, let's try to finish off the last 4 that we have here. The last four are as follows. Number 1. What? What happened? Number 1. Shabbat. Okay, so even though we're discussing the laws of kosher, Shabbat affects the laws of kosher. Why? Because Shabbat sometimes makes whether we could or cannot eat something. It says in the Torah, of course, about Shabbat, Lo tasakam malacha, that you're not allowed to do any work on Shabbat. Okay, our sages learned from this that there is a prohibition for 39 specific laws. I'm sure many of you attended our Shabbat ongoing class that we had actually this same window on Sunday mornings. The 39 laws, they come from the Mishkan, etc. Okay, beautiful. Now, what happens if a Jew, by mistake, maybe he makes a mistake, and he does one of the laws of the prohibitions of Shabbat, specifically that pertain to food. So, for example, he cooks on Shabbat by mistake, right? Or he picks fruit on Shabbat by mistake. These are things that are not allowed to be done on Shabbat. Are we allowed to eat that food? The answer is no. It is prohibited for him and for anyone else to eat of this food, let's say, that was cooked, for example, by mistake on Shabbat. So, for forever, we have to just take that food and throw it out? No. You have to wait till after Shabbat, and you have to wait a particular amount of time that's called bichdei sheyasu. Bichdei sheyasu means the amount of time that it would take to make this. So let's say he cooked something, it took him half an hour to cook it, he stuck it on the pot, he cooked it for half an hour, he didn't know. Mistake. After Shabbat, he wants to eat his food, he has to wait half an hour now before he can eat it. But now this is talking about if somebody changed the fruit. So for example, he cooked something. Beforehand it was raw, it's a piece of meat. It was raw, you would never have eaten it, now it's cooked, and now you can eat it, right? But what if he did something that you're not allowed to do on Shabbat, but he didn't actually change it into fruit? For example, sorting, right? So the law of sorting, for example, prohibits that you're not allowed to eat pistachios on Shabbat. Not allowed to take pistachios and open them up and discard the shell and eat the flesh, eat the actual nut. Right? You're not allowed to eat pistachios on Shabbat. Okay, so let's say he already separated them.
Right.
And now he's got the nut separately, but he didn't change anything in the nut. Right? The nut was always... so there are those that allow, if he did it by mistake, there are those that allow that he can eat it on Shabbat because he didn't make any change in the actual fruit. Okay? Any questions? Okay. Yes?
So if somebody intentionally on Friday peeled a bunch of...
Friday is fine. Anything you do on Friday,
No, I mean, you
Friday before Shabbat,
Yeah.
you're allowed to do anything and then eat it on Shabbat. That's fine. That's called preparing for Shabbat.
Like
We all do that. We cook on Friday
But
and we eat that
also
food on
peanuts
Friday
in a
night.
shell too would be the same way.
Peanuts in a shell is the same thing.
Same thing.
Yeah. Do that? Not allowed to do that on Shabbat. Not allowed to
What
separate.
about like an orange and a peel?
Orange and a peel, you're allowed to.
Yes.
The difference, we'll talk about some other time. Okay? This is nuances for a class on Shabbat. Okay? All right. The next one is shechita, which is slaughtering. We did that one already. Yes?
Fruits that are picked from a tree. Sometimes my son does it. Oh, look at all this fruit.
They should not be eaten on Shabbat.
But can they be eaten afterwards?
Yes, after Shabbat, yes. Yes.
Alright.
And not only that, you only have to wait 3 seconds because how long does it take to pick a fruit? Same thing for fruits that fell on Shabbat, by the way. You shouldn't be eating fruits that fell off of a tree on Shabbat. Which is a very... No, after Shabbat, yes, but on Shabbat you shouldn't. This is a very common case, right? Apples fall off the tree on their own on Shabbat, right? I don't know the details of which fruits do and which fruits don't, but many fruits fall off a tree on their own on Shabbat. You shouldn't... It's called what?
Or the rats make them fall out.
Yeah, squirrels, rats, opossums, yeah, exactly. Yeah. What? It's not know that it's actually it's called perot hanoshrot, which means fruits that fell. I don't think the prohibition is that it was born on Shabbat. I think the issue is a simple issue of that it wasn't available to you before Shabbat. In other words, you would not have been able to eat this, so it becomes muktzah to you. You're not allowed to touch it. I think it ties into the laws of muktzah. But you're catching me off guard. I don't know. Could be it does. Could be it does tie into the laws of Noah. Careful, don't spill. Okay. The next law that pertains to kosher, that pertains to food that we're allowed to eat, which food we're allowed to, which food we're not, is called Shemitah. Shemitah, of course, is the 7-year cycle. There is a verse in the Torah that says, "B'shana hashvit." On the 7th year, Shabbat Shabbaton yiyeh la'aretz. It should be a Sabbath for the land. The whole field, the whole orchard, the whole crops, all of it should be left, and we're not allowed to pick and have enjoyment from those fruits on Shabbat. Generally speaking, the laws of Shemitah are divided into 3 fields. Number 1, you're not allowed to work the land. Number 2, you have to take any fruits that grow on your land, and they have to be hefker. They have to become available to the public. You're not allowed to own them. And number 3 is to keep a particular holiness, to guard a particular holiness on these fruits, which is called Kedushat Shvit, the holiness of the 7th year. Now, our rabbis added to this that any of the fruits that grew, or fruits or vegetables that grew on your land on Shemitah, you're not allowed to eat it. And this is what we're talking about here. Even if they grew on their own, even if you didn't tend to them, even if you kept all the previous laws that we just mentioned, in other words, you didn't work the land, you made them hefker, and you happened to get one, right? Our rabbis made a law that you're not allowed to eat them.
But other people are.
Other people are, yes, but you're not allowed to eat your own fruits that grew on your land.
You can donate it, or people can come.
You put up a sign that says hefker, that's public, yes.
Can, like, for charity, can you allow people to come?
Absolutely, that is the purpose, yes.
That is a purpose.
Yeah.
Even outside Eretz Israel?
No, this only applies in the land of Israel. Correct. And by the way, this makes for an interesting fact, which is that if you go to Israel in the year of Shemitah, it becomes one of the hardest places to keep the laws of kosher. Because, I mean, a good 50% or maybe more of the stores are keeping Shemitah, but some of them are not. So you have to only, and they have these signs. You know, like you eat in a restaurant, they have like a kosher symbol on the outside, this is who's certifying it. They'll have that in groceries, in general in Israel, but they'll also have that, specifically the year of Shemitah, they'll have a specific certificate that says that there's a rabbi that's overseeing that any produce that's sold in this particular store is only from fields that are using, that are abiding by the laws of Shemitah.
And so it's expensive because they have to import more, right? Because they can't use so much of their own local grown fruit.
No, I think there's enough local. I haven't heard of that. I haven't heard of importing to Israel. But I think that what happens is it just makes it a little more expensive because there has to be oversight over all the fields and over all the orchards. What? Okay, no problem. Now, what is the reasoning behind this law? The reason behind this law is because the rabbis saw that there were a lot of people who were transgressing the law. Why? Because they would basically plant their fields, and they would say, "Oh no, I didn't work it. It was wild. This is wild oranges, wild apples, wild wheat, etc. That's growing." And then they would go and eat it. So therefore, the rabbi said, "Hold on, we're going to make a law that says that you're not allowed to eat your own. You can eat somebody else's field from Hefker that was made public, but you cannot eat from your own field because we want to keep people away from this." Okay, the last two are ta'aruvet isur, which is a mixture of prohibited foods. Hold on. Which means as follows: if a person has something that was kosher food, right? It's cold, and into this cold food is mixed some non-kosher food. Okay, so let's say you buy from the store, it doesn't have a kosher symbol, you're planning not to use it, by mistake you end up mixing it with your kosher food. Right now, if you could take out the non-kosher ingredients, let's say it was just, some particular item that you can see it with your eyes, you can literally take your hands, take it out. So take it out, and then you can eat the rest of the dish, no problem. But if it gets mixed in, right? So let's say it's hot and it gets cooked in together. Even after you take out the non-kosher thing, it could be that the taste went from one to the other. We spoke about this when we spoke about the laws of kosherizing vessels, right? So what do you need to do? You need to make sure that any non-kosher flavor that went from the non-kosher item into the kosher item has to be removed. Now, because we don't know how much is removed, so therefore you need to make sure that the minimum amount. What's going on? Okay. Therefore, you need to make sure that the minimum amount of the food that went in becomes nullified versus the other. Right? So now, this is where many of you are familiar with the laws of 1 to 60, right? But actually, there are different laws of nullification of taste depending on which prohibition you're talking about. For example, chametz has one level of prohibition. Milk and meat has another level of prohibition. Non-kosher meat being mixed in with kosher meat has a different level of prohibition. Sometimes it's 1 to 60. Sometimes it is rov, which means 51%. And sometimes it has to be even 200 times that amount. Okay, and then there are some that they never get nullified, even if it's 1,000-fold. So for this, you need to know the proper laws for it. But basically, this is another prohibition that we have, that if you have kosher food that's mixed with non-kosher food, the kosher food becomes not allowed. And the last concept in kosher that we are going to learn about is insects, worms and insects. Okay, in the Torah it says you should not become an abomination. Sorry, we're running a little late here. You should not become an abomination by eating from the insects and the creepy crawlies that there are that will make you impure. You should be holy because I am holy, and you should not make your souls impure. The Torah therefore prohibits 3 categories of tolaim, of worms or of insects, and it has to be insects that you can see with your eyes. And these are the 3 categories: sheretz ha'of, which means flying insects; sheretz ha'aretz, which are creepy crawly insects; and sheretz hamayim, which are insects in the water. All right. All of these, the insects that there are on the land are also divided into 2 categories. One is a category of worms or insects that grow, that are born from a male and a female, right? Typical reproduction. Therefore, we're not allowed to eat them. And the other one is worms or insects that grow from the mold of the fruit, right? So we know that sometimes if you leave an apple out for too long, it'll start to have either fruit flies or fruit insects or fruit worms, etc. They grow from inside the fruit or the vegetables themselves. These are allowed to be eaten technically. Okay, let's talk about what?
Theory of simple organisms arise from like square root fruit.
Yes. What is that?
That's no longer accepted scientific theory.
I don't know. This is the law. So, what I want to talk about is. Okay. By the way, that last point that we said that you're allowed to eat them if they come from the fruit is only after the fruit is cut. If the fruit is still on the tree, so then even if it comes from the fruit itself, you're not allowed to eat it. Now, okay, this is the end of it. But what I want to talk about with regards to that law is that when it becomes practical is not. I don't think any of us are going out and getting insects and eating insects. But what happens is there are certain fruits and vegetables that we are obligated to check. Anybody want to mention some of the most common ones? Strawberries is fruit. Any other ones? Lettuce. Very good. So lettuce, cabbage, things like this. What happens is these fruits and vegetables become now, for example, today when you go to a restaurant, and you order a salad, if there's a kosher symbol on the wall that's over a kosher certification, that's overseeing the kosher certification of this food, then this restaurant, then one of the things they're overseeing is they have a mashgiach. They have somebody who's overseeing the fruits and vegetables and making sure that there aren't any bugs in it. But we have to know this in terms of our homes. If you're going to eat a strawberry, right? If you're going to eat okay, we'll have to get a new one. If you want to eat lettuce, right? So one of the things we're obligated to do is, if it's a fruit or a vegetable that often has insects in it, we have an obligation to check it and make sure that there's no insects in it before we eat it. Okay? And this concludes the law, all of the concepts. I think we did about 30-something of them. Concepts in kosher. That's the beginning, right? All the concepts of kosher, that's our fundamentals. And next week, we will be beginning same time, same place, 10 o'clock a.m., here at Chabad or on Facebook. We will begin next week. We'll be starting with the laws of challah. We'll be diving into the details of the laws of challah, and hopefully we'll do that next week. And then each week we'll do maybe one or half a concept in detail. All right?
Are we allowed?
Thank you all for joining us.
Are we allowed?